They labeled it unstoppable. Moscow draped it in praise and unveiled it as though it were a war-winning marvel, a metallic charm meant to tilt the conflict through mystique alone. Yet when Russia finally deployed its T-90M main battle tanks in the vicinity of Pokrovsk, what followed wasn't terror and domination. It was terror and incineration. Within hours, that veneer of superiority dissolved into flames, and Ukrainian forces converted the planet's finest tank into an object lesson on why technical specifications rarely triumph in contemporary combat. For close to 12 months, the Kremlin stockpiled its latest T-90Ms, holding them back from active engagement while aging T-72s, T-80s, and relics from storage depots bore the brunt of Ukrainian firepower. The reasoning was cold-blooded yet straightforward. Allow the Soviet vintage fleet to deplete enemy ammunition reserves, then deploy the elite machines to deliver the knockout blow. When the operation launched, the objective held strategic value. The assault route cut directly through Shakhov, a modest settlement serving as a defensive node in the fortified belt north of the urban center. The blueprint, thrust forward with a column of 36 armored vehicles, T-90Ms forming the core, accompanied by infantry fighting vehicles, and, in a touch only Kremlin strategists could conceive, 40 motorcycle-mounted soldiers racing ahead as decoys. Vladimir Putin declared it publicly in June 2023. The T-90M stands as the world's premier tank. Nothing and no one poses a threat. The technical specifications backed up the swagger. A 125mm 2A46 M4 smoothbore gun firing conventional ammunition plus laser-guided anti-armor projectiles, an effective engagement range approaching 4,000 meters for missile systems. Published performance figures exceeding 60 kilometers per hour maximum velocity and operational radius beyond 500 kilometers when resupplied in the field. Clad in relict explosive reactive armor, covered with Nikita camouflage netting across the chassis and aft sections, you're looking at a weapon platform that photographs impressively in promotional materials. In actual combat, however, specifications remain theoretical. The adversary administers the final examination. Ukraine delivered precisely that verdict on October 9. Shakhov was hardly defenseless territory. The position was manned by the 225th Assault Regiment alongside components of the 1st Azov Corps, formations that had spent preceding months reclaiming villages surrounding Pokrovsk and establishing fortifications engineered to trap and destroy any armored thrust. When Russia's offensive commenced, it unfolded less as a continuous push than as sequential surges. The motorcycle detachment came first, followed by the tank formations, with each successive group banking on the preceding wave having exhausted Ukrainian ammunition stocks and vigilance. The defenders had different ideas, responding with anti-tank mines, unmanned aerial systems, and concentrated artillery barges. The vanguard disintegrated, forward momentum vanished entirely, and Russia's broken formation limped back toward Velika Novosilka, where nocturnal loitering munitions methodically eliminated the remnants throughout the darkness. The casualty figures told a brutal story. 3 main battle tanks were destroyed outright. 16 infantry fighting vehicles were rendered inoperable. 41 motorcycles were transformed into twisted metal. 2 additional utility vehicles were incinerated as an afterthought. Regarding personnel, the 1st Azov Corps documented 107 fatalities classified as permanent losses alongside 51 wounded requiring evacuation. None of it made a difference. When your premier armored platform encounters a killing ground optimized for aerial drones, explosive obstacles, and surgical firepower, you don't achieve breakthrough. You provide evidence. There's a bitter irony embedded here. Moscow spent months accumulating the armored vehicle it continuously promoted. By the time it reached the front, the conflict had evolved beyond it. Ukrainian forces had already constructed the countermeasures. The T-90M isn't some fictional antagonist. It represents a genuine advancement over designs from the 1990s. Yet that heritage reveals everything. The T-90 lineage entered production in 1994, a 30-year span during which global weapons technology accelerated far beyond defensive plating developments. The T-90M inherited its fundamental architecture and certain problematic characteristics from previous Soviet engineering. It continues employing a carousel-style automatic loading mechanism that positions explosive ordnance perilously near the crew compartment without adequate separation barriers. In an environment dominated by overhead strike munitions and precision aerial systems, this arrangement resembles keeping pyrotechnics beneath your cooking surface. A direct vertical impact transforms an armored vehicle into a crematorium. Moscow doesn't acknowledge this as an engineering deficiency. Ukrainian operators identify it as an aiming point. More troubling still, combat documentation has revealed malfunctions absent from any marketing literature. Forbes termed one phenomenon spinning turret syndrome, a malfunction where specific damage causes the T-90M's turret to rotate without control, converting a multi-million-dollar weapons platform into the planet's most lethal rotating toy. Ukrainian forces have triggered this breakdown across numerous confrontations. First-person view drones induced it during December 2023 operations. Combined munitions replicated the effect throughout May 2024. A January 2024 engagement even saw M2 Bradley fighting vehicles, theoretically inferior, contribute to neutralizing AT-90M when its turret mechanism entered spontaneous rotation mode. Protective plating becomes irrelevant when your turret chooses to pirouette. Consider this: the Kremlin didn't merely promote the T-90M, it constructed an entire operational philosophy centered on it. This platform was intended to penetrate defensive gaps and shatter hardened positions. The offensive near Shakhov resembled something lifted directly from Cold War military manuals. Concentrated armor formations advancing with infantry support, velocity itself functioning as protection. Contemporary defenders, however, operate under entirely different principles. They channel attacking columns into predetermined destruction zones using explosive barriers. They eliminate battlefield obscurity through unmanned reconnaissance systems. They coordinate indirect fire within moments rather than extended intervals. They conclude operations after sunset using propeller-driven loitering weapons guided by real-time visual transmission. Throughout this sequence, the T-90M's defensive measures, relict explosive tiles, external cage frameworks, obscurant generators, encounter challenges they were never engineered to address. Reactive armor cannot counter a vertical strike when the projectile descends at hypersonic velocity. Electronic warfare cannot disrupt a hovering munition controlled by an operator viewing live imagery through manual input. October 9th offered no withdrawal opportunity. For a particularly stinging detail, examine the production statistics. Intelligence assessments suggest roughly 60 to 70 T-90Ms manufactured during 2022, between 140 and 180 throughout 2023, and approximately 280 to 300 in 2024. The sobering counterpoint: Ukrainian authorities report eliminating over 11,000 Russian armored vehicles since hostilities escalated to full-scale war. Whether one disputes the exact accounting, the replacement mathematics remain inescapable. Several hundred fresh tanks annually cannot compensate for a combat environment where 3 platforms can be eliminated before midday at Shakhov. Producing 1/10 of annual attrition doesn't represent industrial triumph. It represents hemorrhaging resources beneath cosmetic rhetoric. On the international stage, the platform's credibility has already suffered collateral damage. India was positioned as the flagship purchaser, committing to a substantial contract in 2019. What followed were operational grievances, highly visible failures during competitive tank exhibitions where T-90 variants broke down, and a strategic pivot toward overhaul programs or alternative procurement rather than expanding the existing fleet. None of these setbacks originated from Ukrainian aerial threats. These issues predated the present conflict entirely. The supposedly supreme tank experienced difficulties during controlled peacetime evaluations and ceremonial displays well before encountering genuine battlefield opposition. So what explains the offensive's collapse? Because contemporary armored operations constitute an integrated system, not isolated combat. The T-90M functions as one element, a fragile element. Within a destruction network, Ukrainian forces have mastered coordinating. Russian forces approached Shakhov applying armored warfare fundamentals: overwhelming force, rapid movement, numerical superiority. Ukrainian defenders responded applying 21st century principles: distributed sensors, weapon saturation, surgical accuracy. Explosive obstacles established the framework. Unmanned systems delivered reconnaissance and opening strikes. Indirect fire performed the primary destruction. Nocturnal loitering munitions completed the accounting. One particularly savage element deserves mention: 40 motorcycles leading the formation to absorb defensive firepower. On paper, it resembles satirical combined arms doctrine. In execution, it proved catastrophic. If the objective involved depleting Ukrainian ammunition reserves, unmanned systems remain indifferent. If the intent was provoking premature defensive responses, explosive barriers remain unmoved. The motorcycles perished pursuing momentum that never materialized. Let's examine the alleged imperviousness with some grounded perspective. Even when the T-90M withstands initial contact and maintains mobility, subsequent threats are specifically architected to eliminate resilience. First-person view aerial systems recalibrate and target vulnerability points. Overhead attack ordnance disregards frontal slope geometry and penetrates dorsal surfaces. Should the turret mechanism enter uncontrolled rotation, occupants face binary choices: emergency egress or remaining aboard a lethal carnival ride culminating in costly demise. Stepping back reveals implications transcending a single disastrous engagement at Shakov. What emerges is that an armored platform conceived during a previous technological epoch now undergoes live battlefield validation against multi-layered defensive systems Soviet planners never envisioned. During 1994, nobody theorized inexpensive unmanned aircraft penetrating optical equipment or company-scale artillery units directing surgical strikes via quadcopter telemetry, or irregular forces deploying improvised loitering munitions above withdrawal corridors to eliminate retreating personnel after nightfall. The T-90M's engineering team performed standard design iterations, reinforcing protective plating, refining targeting systems, attaching explosive reactive modules, integrating active defense mechanisms. Ukrainian defensive forces executed what contemporary warfare demands: identifying exposure angles protective systems cannot shield, using munitions defensive systems struggle countering, directed by reconnaissance platforms defensive systems cannot suppress. This asymmetry explains why 12 months of Russian accumulation collapsed into a single-day catastrophe. What insights emerge from Shakov's events? The primary takeaway: hardware advancement and operational philosophy function as inseparable elements, and updating one while neglecting the other proves futile. Concentrated armored formations absent aerial supremacy represent historical reenactment rather than viable tactics. The second understanding: protection in 2025 depends on geometric vulnerabilities and detection capabilities rather than solely armor thickness. Third observation: proclaiming your platform unstoppable guarantees that every unmanned systems operator within 50 kilometers radius perceives it as a reputation-building opportunity. The final revelation concerns transformed battlefield psychology. Armored vehicles historically generated intimidation through physical presence. Currently, they attract focus proportional to their financial value. When a Ukrainian formation encounters a T-90M, the cognitive process isn't, "That's unkillable." It's, "What resource commitment does elimination require?" The purportedly supreme tank encountered the conflict's fundamental principle: failure to evolve means becoming subject to others' evolution. If an armored platform asserting dominance can be defeated by integrated networks of inexpensive reconnaissance devices, precision-guided ordnance, and well-trained ground forces, what configuration will future armored combat assume? Perhaps it's the timeless principle repackaged: victory belongs not to whoever fields the largest hardware, but to whoever develops superior employment strategies for available hardware. October 9th demonstrated Ukraine possessed that strategic framework. Russia possessed the T-90M. Within 24 hours, battlefield conditions administered the final assessment.